What is up, guys? Welcome back to Think Shank. It is wonderful to be back. Happy belated holidays. I have been juggling a lot. I have a new album coming out that I am super excited about, and honestly, I've just been heads down and really focused on mastering it. That is just a small, subtle plug. Clearly, there's been a million incredible things about the NBA. Of course, Christmas and all of the rest. The Kings fired Mike Brown, and now everything is fantastic. Wemby is a top 10 player in the NBA, and the Cavs are pretty much unbeatable. What I really want to jump into has to do with the new era of NBA contention. I see a ton of tweets like this that effectively boils down to, well, if my team played X instead of Y, who's a way worse matchup for us than Z would have happened, I really want to examine why that's such an outdated take for the new and evolved NBA environment. For the most part, we have been raised with the belief that there are black and white best and better teams in a universal sense, basically meaning cutting across the entire league, that will ultimately feed into the inevitable showdown of those maybe 2 to 3 teams every season, and the regular season and, of course, the playoffs themselves are going to be pretty linear. These teams are going to show up in the first round or woohoo, let's go play-in. But honestly, if you're playing either a 9th or 10th seed as a 1 or 7 or 8, if you're 2, that's going to be a layup. The second round might be a little bit closer, but probably not really that surprising. That has just kind of been the script overall that we've all been kind of used to. The first point I want to highlight here is that there are 2 main drivers behind why that belief is dissolving. And this is very, very important. Number 1 is because of talent parity. It is no secret that the tide of talent across the league is rising year after year after year as the sport continues to grow, the league continues to grow. We've got new media money, more camps, more everything. Even with hubbub around the league falling off and viewership being down, there are so many incredible athletes and incredibly talented ones that are entering the league year after year. They're more skilled, they're bigger, they're smarter. That is permeating across the entire landscape of the NBA, from your bottom feeders all the way up to the 15th man on Oklahoma City. AJ Mitchell was on a 10-day contract, but looked like he could be in the running for 6th man of the year, which is absolutely bonkers and a great testament to the OKC farm, pun intended, haha, Oklahoma. I don't know if that's even true or accurate, but whatever. The dead carcass of a horse being the new CBA that is effectively limiting player movement and introducing strategic, not just financial penalties like the luxury tax is really the only consequence, as it were. Previously, now it's a lot harsher and teams are more disincentivized to go past it unless you're Phoenix and you're batshit crazy. And number 2 is the counterbalance or extension of talent parity, and that is the consequential vitality of matchups come the postseason as far as determining the actual victors along the way. Different matchups will present astronomically different potential outcomes every single night. This is why the earlier tweets that I showed you originated shockingly from a diehard Denver fan who's on Twitter, and I don't actually know if he ever gets off of it. Frankly, it's a little bit sad, these kinds of people, but obviously I love that and I love the commitment. He is obviously frustrated because his own team, of course, matched up in the second round against really the only team in the entire NBA, in my estimation, that could have actually beaten Denver last year. And even though Denver built itself a 20-point lead going into that third quarter, and then, of course, they collapsed, that reality is never going to be remembered. They basically choked and didn't really lose, but alas, that outcome was really frustrating, and the animosity towards teams like the Mavericks, who were playing a bunch of 21-year-olds in their first ever playoffs, getting to go on through Oklahoma City and then play the Timberwolves, who also, of course, had notoriously never been to the second round of the playoffs since 2003 and didn't have experience in that setting either. Pointing fingers at the Mavs for having an easier playoff path and being uniquely capable of beating that very same team, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who, of course, were built to beat Denver and succeeded in doing so. And this kind of finger pointing is very concerning and already something I deem worth shining a light on, because it is not going to slow down that current trend as we embark into this brand new NBA era. Those two primary factors, talent parity across the league, as well as more consequential role of matchups in the postseason, is effectively evolving the postseason environment to mirror something closer to the NCAA or FIFA. There is supreme talent parity, which results in a very high level of volatility in who actually ascends through the brackets, and people make like millions of dollars for actually getting the prediction right, because it is that even of a playing field. That level of volatility of outcomes is one of the biggest drivers from a business lens behind why it is so captivating and exciting for fans, and also why it is such an incredibly successful product every single March. I hope it is no surprise that obviously the NBA is a lot more talented, but that historical precedent of better teams just mow down the competition, and ultimately we get LeBron James in the finals 8 straight years, and the Warriors all but getting 5 rings in 6, 7 years or whatever it was. Think about it from Adam Silver's perspective. Well, March Madness is great because you can't predict the outcome as well, and guys have to win in the margins by sacrificing their bodies and winning every 50-50 ball and locking in on defense and everything that we love about that. Not to mention, you engage new fan bases of smaller markets, of course, with the new CBA, and allowing those teams to essentially play on a more even playing field where they are not always left out of the superstar sweepstakes that had traditionally been in place. If every team is better, and every matchup or possible combination of matchups, round after round after round, can very heavily sway the actual outcomes, that is starting to mimic that kind of captivating allure of the NCAA product, with a high volatility of actual outcomes, necessitating guys to sacrifice their fucking bodies and break their legs and dive for every 50-50 ball, and it comes down to a last-second free throw. That is where the future of the NBA is trending, and it has been partially engineered by Adam Silver in a way that signifies, to me at least, he had recognized that first driving factor of the overall level of talent in the league rising, and essentially implemented that new CBA to be one of the greatest parity catalysts in NBA history. There is no superstar life raft to help you, Lakers. I'm sorry. Now you have to be looking inwards and downwards. You have to be identifying young talent, developing them properly instituting a program that is going to develop strong system-oriented players that is ultimately going to further shape the NBA more and more closely to resemble the NCAA, because at the end of the day, do you really know anything about the NCAA teams on an individual level? For like 4 teams, maybe, but overall, it's kind of the team. And that is a product of the program, which is something that really not a lot of organizations have invested in cultivating. The Miami Heat, the San Antonio Spurs, now Oklahoma City, that kind of pipeline is really the most palpable mechanism for finding success with such a restrictive new CBA environment, because young guys don't make a lot of money, relatively speaking. Back to the origin of this entire video, where folks want to try and utilize versatility of winning as the currency of a team's deservingness of succeeding in the postseason, is a very slippery slope, and it actually erodes the spirit of this, in my opinion, extremely exciting new age of NBA basketball. Why is this widely echoed sentiment not fair and not empirically sound in the new NBA era? It's because the playoff matchups come the postseason are by nature unpredictable, especially taking the Western Conference this season as an example. You have about a handful of games separating third place from 10th place. All of these teams are clawing ferociously to try and get themselves out of the play-in, and of course that just makes a lot of sense, and more rest time leading into the playoffs and yada yada. You really can effectively game plan weeks before the end of the regular season and already try to get your bearings and start doing your homework, just like last year with Denver and Oklahoma City and the Minnesota Timberwolves could and probably will come down to the last game or handful of games. It means that building that versatility, both from a roster and schematic sense, is imperative. However, it guarantees nothing ultimately. Matchups with make or break consequences are the foundation of the NBA playoffs now, not just a feature of it that will ultimately be overcome. The truth is, playoff matchups with make or break consequences are the foundation of the playoffs now, not just a feature of it, just like the NCAA or FIFA, where you have this talent parity component, new CBA, the overall tide of talent rising, as well as the consequential extension where playoff matchups actually carry pretty significant schematic and roster related advantages or disadvantages, and everything that everybody says when they complain about X being a bad matchup for my team Y, and if it wasn't the case, then Z would have happened. That is so out of touch now that it should be highlighted and shouted into the void, which is what I'm trying to do preemptively, because a lot of teams are going to experience what the Denver Nuggets fan base did last season, where admittedly, and I would agree with it, they ended up playing the one singular team in the entire NBA that was actually capable of beating them come the postseason in the second round of the Western Conference playoffs. Nobody seems to remember that they had built a 20-point lead before collapsing from exhaustion, which of course was also partially their fault for not really game planning the regular season as well as they should have, but that is another symptom, I believe, of the new and evolved NBA environment. That is a spectacular analog for what is to come for just about every single playoff team as we continue down this path of better and better players coming in, teams shifting their investments away from shopping on the open market and running the business like it is a 2K game to building up actual programs to identify and develop young players that aren't going to destroy your salary cap sheet. Now that's very, very high with levels of potential penalties if you overspend, which of course makes the younger players just way more valuable. So you just have to be smarter, have a longer time horizon, and develop players that way. The Oklahoma City farm, pun intended, is the ideal and textbook poster child for effectively how most teams are going to have to play their hands. So the term fluke, or better in universal terms between contending teams, oh, the Nuggets were just better than the Mavs last year, those are just outdated terms now. You have to acknowledge and recognize this whole landscape is different. And again, as teams continue to develop and grow, as the baseline tide of talent continues to rise, there will be a lot of teams and their corresponding fan bases will feel like they deserve for their team to make it further in the postseason because they possess more winning versatility against a larger sample of the league than a different team, and will probably come and knock on those fans and their teams, just like our friend here, who is a Denver Nuggets stan. That philosophical and psychological concept is what I'm trying to get in front of. We can't continue to operate in that old way of thinking where the subliminal belief is that more winning versatility is synonymous with being more deserving of getting further in the playoffs. The reality is that being able to put up a better fight against more teams doesn't guarantee anything in an environment where the tide of talent has grown so much to the point where overall talent parity inside of the realm of contending teams or what have you, there will just be a larger number. The resulting experimentation and evolution of different schemes in utilizing that increasing tide of talent is going to just bring more consequences for different kinds of matchups. So early losses and unpredictable success are going to be foundations of the NBA playoffs moving forward, not just a one-off feature. We are going to witness what we saw in that Nuggets-Wolves series become the norm because of those implications and consequences of different matchups and every team just being a bigger and bigger threat. Adam Silver, ever the ambassador of the shareholders that propel and prop up the NBA, has catalyzed parity across the NBA to effectively mirror the appeal and volatility of the NCAA product by injecting more unpredictability, both again of those matchups by making the regular season way more competitive, but also magnifying the implications of more and more talent coming into the league. He wants what happened to Denver to become the norm, and that is effectively where the league is headed. And so as us fans of a promising team, we have to be mindful of that reality and internalize more of that NCAA mindset where the level of volatility, because of the level of parity, is the foundation of the outcome. And when there's an upset, it's kind of like not that big of a deal because, again, there is so much parity. Dabble on top of that, the ability of the greatest schematic and strategic minds in basketball being able to constantly innovate in leveraging these more and more talented players who are coming into the league every single year, we're just going to get some new stuff and new play styles and more team-oriented basketball that is going to present more and more, in my opinion, unique strengths and weaknesses that innately present more possibility for early playoff losses due to those different and more unpredictable matchups come the finale of the regular season, which is just going to be a dogfight and probably come down again to the final game. The faster that we all accept this and stop degrading other teams' success, like Nuggets fans to Mavs fans, for having an easier playoff path, the faster we can outgrow these growing pain reasons and collectively appreciate how awesome this new NBA era is as a whole. All right, guys, it is great to be back. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.